All right, in today's lecture, we are concluding the book of Genesis and going to begin the book of Exodus. So we will resume where we left off at Genesis chapter 48, verse 20. So he, Israel, blessed them, that is Manasseh and Ephraim, that day, saying, By you, Israel will pronounce blessing, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope which I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. Chapter 49. Then Jacob called his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the days to come. Assemble and hear, O sons of Jacob, and hearken to Israel your father. Verse 3. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the firstfruits of my strength. So as firstborn, Reuben should be receiving the double portion. And Israel continues, preeminent in pride and preeminent in power. This is another example of synonymous parallelism, all right, that poetic device that Hebrews use. You repeat the same thing back to back, considered good poetry. Verse 4, unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. You went up to my couch. You went up to your father's bed. You went up to my couch. Synonymous parallelism. Right, and that's referencing back to Genesis 35, verse 22, when Reuben went and laid with Israel's concubine. Verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. O my soul, come not into their counsel. O my spirit, be not joined to their company. Again, that's synonymous parallelism. And this is a reference, it's caused back to Genesis chapter 34, verse 25, when Simeon and Levi went and killed the men of the city that Shechem was from. You can make also a note that in this curse, at least the Levites are going to find a redemption with their swords. You can make a note here to Exodus 32. In Exodus 32, the Levites will put their swords to good use, and they will actually receive a blessing because of them. They'll have a redemption. For in their anger they slay men, and in their wantonness they hamstring oxen. Verse 7, Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. You can make a note here to Joshua chapter 18, verse 7, as well as chapter 19, verses 1 and 9. When the nation of Israel enters the promised land, each tribe is going to get an allotment of land. And the Simeonites and the Levites, they end up being scattered across throughout Israel. They end up with no real allotment, so to speak, of their own. Now, verse 8, we get to the fourth son of Jacob and Leah. Remember, Jacob and Leah. Leah was the first wife, so that is the proper marriage, right? The non-polygamous marriage through which the covenant is going to pass. Verse 8, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he lurked as a lion, and as a lioness, who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Make a note here to Numbers chapter 24. 2 Samuel chapter 7, So Numbers chapter 24 and 2 Samuel chapter 7. And this is a dual prophecy. You'll see this a lot in the Old Testament, that a prophecy will have multiple fulfillments. So the first individual that this prophecy is fulfilled in is in King David. And the ultimate fulfillment of this prophecy, though, is going to come in Jesus Christ. All right, so Jesus is going to be a descendant of Judah. Verse 11, binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine and his teeth white with milk. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant, so he bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a slave at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider falls backward. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a deer let loose, that bears comely fawns. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers fiercely attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him sorely. Yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel. By the God of your father who will help you, by God Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of the eternal mountains, the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was separate from his brothers. So Joseph gets this long, elaborate blessing. And again, just to harp on, Jacob's polygamy not having good consequences. Joseph's preeminence you have two preeminent brothers. You have Judah, the preeminent son of Leah, and then Joseph, who's the preeminent son of Rachel. And later on in the history of Israel, these two tribes, as they rise to preeminence, there's going to become a rivalry between them. And eventually, the tribe of Joseph, or the tribe of Ephraim, is going to rule over the northern kingdom of Israel, where it's going to fall into polygamy. And that northern kingdom eventually becomes the land of Samaria. And so when you hear in the Gospels in the New Testament about like Jesus and the Samaritan woman, or like how Jews and Samaritans don't get along, it's the remnant. It's made up of a couple different peoples, but part of it is the remnant of that northern kingdom that the tribe of Joseph ruled in, and then the Jews are the descendants of Judah who are in the southern kingdom, who adhere to the throne of David. Verse 27, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with the blessing suitable to him. Then he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. You can make a note back to Genesis 23. That is when Abraham purchased the field, and that's the tomb of the patriarchs that we've been referencing. Verse 30, in the cave that is in the field at Machpelah, to the east of Marm, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. All right, so notice that Leah is referenced here as being buried in the tomb of the patriarchs. Okay, just again in the text, you're seeing that evidence that as first wife, she does have preeminence, even though Jacob preferred Rachel, and even though Jacob's favorite son is Joseph, you can see that Leah gets her due and Judah's going to get his due by the honor of the burial place. Verse 32, the field and the cave that is in it were purchased from the Hittites. When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. Chapter 50. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for so many are required for embalming, and the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favor in your eyes, speak, I beg you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die. In my tomb, which I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there shall you bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I beg you, and bury my father, then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of the household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and sorrowful lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. Therefore the place was named Abel-Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess for a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil which we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, Forgive, I beg you, the transgressions of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now we pray you, forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. So they make up this lie because they're worried that now that Dad's out of the way, Joseph might be actually holding in some grudge against his brothers, and now that he won't make his dad sad with the death of the rest of his children, now that his dad's passed on, they're worried that Joseph might enact some revenge. They doubt Joseph's virtue and the authenticity of his initial forgiveness. We read that Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Verse 18. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, Behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, highlight this whole portion, all right, these next couple of verses. Fear not, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. The book of Genesis is coming to its conclusion, and in its conclusion, you get the summary of the theme of salvation history. All right? We began with the story of creation and then with the fall of man. And immediately after the fall of man, there was a promise for a redeemer. And at the conclusion of Genesis, Joseph, in prophecy, utters the whole point of salvation history. What we intend as evil, all right, what humanity does as evil, God will always bring about the greater good. The goodness of the incarnation of God becoming man, dying on the cross, and giving us sanctifying grace that we can now participate as sons and daughters of God with, God, the second person, Christ, as our brother. outweighs the evil of the fall drastically. So you get this concluding point in Genesis. It explains everything that we've been reading up to this point of like, there's a lot of messed stuff we read, okay? Like, how did this make in the Bible? The Bible's kind of violent. But here you have the purpose. What you meant for evil against me, God meant for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Verse 21, so do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he reassured them and comforted them. So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were born upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph took an oath of the sons of Israel, saying, God will visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So Joseph has faith in the promise that God gave to Abraham, which is that Abraham's descendants would live in that promised land. And so he makes his brothers swear and their descendants that they will carry Joseph's tomb and his body back to the promised land to be buried in the tomb of the patriarchs. Also, before we move on into the Exodus, I want to point out something to you. Matthew's gospel is going to parallel the story of the nation of Israel. So throughout Genesis, we point out a couple of times we're like, okay, Abraham went down to Egypt, and then Abraham has to come back, and God's fighting on his side, and he enters into the promised land. And Abraham's life is like a microcosm of what the nation of Israel goes through. And now, as we turn to the book of Exodus, we're going to get the story of the nation of Israel being led by Moses. But in Matthew's gospel, the narrative structure of that gospel, what Christ does in that gospel follows the same pattern of the nation of Israel. And just like a couple points I'll share right now. Israel has gone into Egypt. All right. After Christ's birth in Bethlehem, the Holy Family flees into Egypt. And then there's a return from Egypt and a crossing of the Jordan. After Christ's infancy narrative, he goes out into the wilderness for 40 days, just like Israel's in the desert for 40 years. And then he goes to the Jordan to be baptized by John. All right. So for that reason, Christ is called the new Israel, a representative of the man and also of the nation.